Good morning. This is Critical Morning. I would like to welcome you in our office, which we changed into the TV studio. Hi, guys. So I would like to congratulate you this your film, Higher Love. I love this film very much, and we are waiting, as I think, for the director of Nonosca. And Artur Zaborski will be the host. Artur, the micro is yours.
Thank you so much, Krzysztof. So as it was said, we have Hassan Oswald here with us. Hello, Hassan. Where are you and what are you doing?
Yes, hi everyone. Hi all the viewers and to my hosts. I am in northern Iraq currently, working on my next feature documentary. Stuck here for the last 4 months, but it's actually quite pleasant and safe. So yeah, really happy to be here with you guys today.
I'm super happy that you are working on another project because I believe that the next year when the festival is gonna be in the real circumstances happening in Krakow, we can meet in person. But today we're gonna talk about your film Higher Love. I have to say that I watched it yesterday and it was a very strong movie for me. It was really strong subject and strong theme. I was wondering during watching it that you decided to do not present any statistics, anything that is like the comment on from the psychologists or the politicians or the people that are involved somehow in dealing with this project, you decided only to present the human stories. At which point you decided to depict it like that and why you decided to go through that perspective?
Sure. So we started actually with about eight to 10 vignettes or profiles that got narrowed down to three or four, Iman, Nani, Daryl, Darnez. But it had started as a commentary on not only post-industrial decline, these kind of cities of the failed American dream, Flint, Cleveland, Detroit, Camden. And so we actually did have sit-down interviews at the beginning. We were filming with politicians, local leaders, police, kind of everyone. And those actually never even made it into the edit. So I'd say pretty early on, we knew that we were going to go for the human, pure verite side of things, because we knew that this wasn't a story to be told by policy wonks or politicians. It was a story to be told and seen through the eyes of those who were living it and those who kind of haven't had a voice for years, decades. The stigma of addiction, the stigma of living in cities like Camden. So we decided very early on to just film the characters and give them agency to tell their own story, to see this epidemic and this scourge of what's going on in these East Coast cities and kind of worldwide, definitely across America. We wanted to give them the chance to tell their own story and without statistics or sit-down interviews or anything like that.
And when was the moment that actually you decided to dig in this subject? Was it any particular time, any particular situation that you saw that this is something that you want to take your camera and talk about?
So I guess we started filming in Flint, Michigan, and the film kind of, it started as the story of post-industrial America, this failed American dream. So we started in Flint, and they're dealing with the water crisis. And then very soon we saw that a lot of cities are dealing with this. So our next stop was Camden. My father is actually from Camden. He was raised there. And so it was never about the opioid epidemic from the start. It was about this failed American dream. But we knew right when we got to Camden that this is kind of where we were going to stay. I hope that Flint turns into a short of some sort. It's a very, that story needs to be told as well, but Camden kind of just grabbed us. And we knew that cities like this, they're called drive-by cities, flyover cities. They haven't had their voice told. So an early version or an early title of the film was actually called Below the Brine. It's a poem by Walt Whitman, who's actually from Camden. and it's about a city, so it's called Below the Brine, and it's about a culture, a society that live beneath the surface of the ocean that nobody ever pays attention to, no one ever sees, and that is Camden. So I didn't have a connection to the opioid epidemic, but I did have this kind of need to tell stories that haven't been told, or stories that have long been ignored because of where they're taking place. So I wanted to dive in below the brine, as Walt Whitman put it, and tell these stories on a very individual, very kind of raw level. So that was my initial attraction to the story, not that the opioid epidemic wasn't a story needing to be told. Of course it is, and it was. But that came kind of secondarily to trying to tell a human story, seeing kind of a glimpse into these cities that have long been ignored.
Crisis in Flint, that was something that was actually covered by the media, even in Poland. Even here, we had a discussion about it, and we knew about that subject. But the subject of opioid epidemic is something that actually is not so common in the media. It's not like these people are not the people that we get interested about. Did you feel like some kind of a mission that you bring voice to these people, that you actually present them to the world, and actually that you are pointing the problem?
Yes, definitely. And it wasn't just, so the opioid epidemic, it's kind of the crux of the story, and it's definitely, so Camden is known as, it's heroin highway. It's got the purest, cheapest heroin in the East Coast, probably in the country. So it definitely was the crux of that story. And I knew that I had to tell it through their eyes, which hasn't really been seen in this way. How it's the access I was granted and the trust I was given by these characters was just incredible right from day one. So it was the opioid epidemic, but also 1 in 8 families in the U.S. has one of the parents suffering from some type of substance abuse. And so we also did kind of talk about the ideas of alcohol abuse. You can see Daryl struggles with substance abuse as well. He also has a different kind of addiction to not only alcohol, but to this kind of disastrous love that seems to be dragging him and his child down. So I did feel a mission to show this opioid epidemic through the eyes of the characters and with their voices. But I also felt the mission to show that there are other kinds of substance abuse, other kinds of addictions that can be just as detrimental to family life, just as disastrous to city life and city and societies. So yeah, it was the opioid epidemic, but it was also other kinds of substance abuse that I wanted to kind of
this trust that you are talking about is definitely something that is very visible on the screen. It's pretty incredible how far the characters allowed you to get into their lives. How did you work for that? And we
so
have,
I think,
sorry, Hassan, before you answer, I just wanted to announce that we have Peter here with us. Peter, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Hi, Peter. Thank you for joining us. We will get back to you shortly. We will just finish the few questions with Hassan, and we will return to you and talk about Nonosca, okay?
Okay, do you see me well?
We cannot see you. I think that we see some frame or some image from your wall, maybe?
Yeah. Can you see me?
Now we can see your table and your office, yes.
Is this better?
And now we can see you. This is better. Hello, Peter. Now we can see you and hear you.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you so much. We will get back to you shortly. And Hassan, let me return to the question about how did you gain the trust of your characters?
Sure. So it actually happened. So I still am and was very new in the film world. I was an English teacher until right before I filmed this. So I had zero experience. I had zero budget. Camden was a 2-hour drive from New York City, and I had, as I mentioned, my father's from there, so I had relatives in the area. So because of that, no budget, I had to wear all the hats: editor, producer, cameraman. So I had no other choice but to go meet these characters where they were. So I would knock on doors to these drug houses. I would knock on the doors to the drug dealing houses. We call them the trap houses, because I had no other option. And this kind of really started a strong trust right from the get-go with my characters. They saw that I was, not going to exploit them, not going to kind of film and then disappear. I was there for the long haul, and I had come to their doorstep to help them tell their story, which hadn't happened in cities like this, to people like this. So right from the start, I met them where they were, and that was a really strong foundation to build this film where I'm, more than a fly on the wall. I was really accepted as part of their lives, and you can see in scenes where it almost seems scripted, for like when Daryl and Nani are arguing in the car and he's screaming out. That was, so you can see at the end of that scene, he kind of looks at me, looks at the camera, and that's not a look of, it's a look of disappointment in himself. He had forgotten almost that I was there. And that's kind of what I had achieved through the months and months of filming, to a point where I wasn't, obviously, in any scene when a camera is on, the dynamic has changed. But I managed to, the trust that they gave me and the access they gave me, that amount of change that was brought in the scenes was a bare minimum. So they just, and I can't thank them enough for this, they welcomed me into the community and they welcomed me into their lives. And I think it's because I had no other choice but to knock on their doors and say, can I tell your story, or can I help you tell your story?
I have to tell you that when I was watching your film, I was wondering all the time, how did you manage to even plan or schedule any day of shooting with that kind of characters, with people who have no homes, with people who have no day schedule? How was it even possible for you to catch them and follow them?
Yeah, that was definitely a challenge. And I kind of, as a first-time film director, and even is my first time directing anything, not just a feature doc, I had no other choice but to drive around. And so they don't have cell phones for the most part. They don't have houses. The city, it's a big city, but you just kind of get used to, they get used to you. So it is a lot, in our film, it's a group of 4 or 5 individuals suffering from addiction, but really that community is very tight knit, and it's about, 50 to 100, and they all know where each other is at all times. So as the filming progressed and I became kind of a familiar face in the community, that did get easier. But yeah, it's a really hard thing to film, not only in cities like this, but with characters like this who have no schedule, no house, no phone. So you just kind of learn as you go, and then by the end it wasn't as difficult, but getting started was really difficult.
Before we talk to Peter, I just want to ask you 2 more questions. The first question is actually a gossip that I would like you to comment on, because the Little Birds told me that to make this film, to get the budget for this film, you even sold your blood plasma. Is that true?
Yeah, there was a lot of, so this was like pure indie guerrilla filmmaking. I had, of course, no one was going to give me a budget. No one would even give me an internship, which is kind of why this got made, because no one was going to hire me as any level in film. And I knew I had self-taught editing, producing, filming, but still I had no CV. I had nothing on my resume. So of course, no one was going to give me a budget. So yeah, I would donate my blood twice a week for the blood plasma. That was to kind of make ends meet. And then there was a lot of other tricks we used. So we would buy cameras and lenses and return them within the 30 days, or buy editing systems from Apple and return them within 30 days. That was a trick. I mean, we would make PVC piping rigs for like steady cams for $1. We'd look on YouTube how to make them because we're shooting with these little DSLR sized cameras. It's not that steady. So we would go to Home Depot and make dollar rigs out of PVC piping. So there was a lot of tricks and borderline illegal things that we just had to do because we had zero money. It was all savings and those disappeared really quickly. So, I mean, the budget of this film was, I won't say the exact number, but comically low, at least until we got into post and we had a bit of a following and more people on board. But it was a one-man team and sometimes a two-man team until midway through filming, and then into post we brought some people on. But yeah, there was a lot of tricks we used, like blood, selling my blood, and the return tricks to get this to where it is now.
So shooting a film can be really addictive, and you can go really far to do that. Last question, I am super curious about like working with such a gentle subject. I believe that there is a huge risk of going into the poverty porn or showing graphic nature of heroin addiction. Did you have to create a concrete rules that actually you do not shoot if these people are in some high condition or anything like that? Or did you allow yourself to do anything and then in the editing room you were deciding on what's staying and what you are deleting?
Sure. So because of my inexperience and because of what I found attractive as a viewer before I got into film, I filmed everything. And early on, I realized that the characters are pretty much always under the influence, but there are levels to that. Like obviously, I would put their safety first if there was an overdose, or something like that, or especially with the child involved. That was always an issue while filming. What do I do? What do I prevent? But with trying to avoid poverty porn, I mean, on the surface, this film and films like it, it's almost impossible to avoid that trope of poverty porn. But we did address that in the edit very strongly, and it was a point of contention. We probably had 90% more, maybe double the amount of injections in our original cuts. And then through discussion, and I had great producers, an amazing editor, Kate Plum, we decided that we weren't going to show this gratuitous drug use unless it served a purpose. So you'll see in the film, the first injections you see, the first drug use you see in the motel. That was a really brutal scene in earlier cuts, but we scaled it down. But we did keep it in, and the injection, because it was Nani for the first time. We saw for the first time Nani going to this other world that so it complemented what she was saying. It wasn't just drug use. And then so we carried that through as well. So Iman's drug use, we scaled it back to only when we can see him struggling. So we wanted, or when we see him heading to rehab or on the way back from rehab. So we wanted to keep it in because it is raw. It is the raw kind of, this is what was happening. We weren't, forcing them to inject, obviously, or anything like that. So we wanted to keep that in, but we also knew that it had to be calculated when we showed it to avoid this kind of poverty porn, the possibility of it coming across as poverty porn. So we wanted to accompany those injections or those drug use scenes with some depth to character. So it had to show something about their character rather than just an injection, an overdose, blood flowing down the hands. So we did cut almost 50, 60, 70% of the drug use out of the film when it wasn't needed to kind of show depth to our characters.
Gotcha. Thank you so much. Peter, now it's time for us to talk. Thank you so much for joining us. Let me just introduce you to our viewer, Peter Torbjörnsson, the director of the epic documentary Nonosca. How are you, Peter?
I'm fine, but a little bit unused to this form.
Yeah, it's something very new for all of us to meet in the virtual world, but let's try to cope with that. Peter, I would like us to go back 40 years, to go back for 40 years and to be in Nicaragua at that time. What were the circumstances that actually brought you into this country? How it happened that you came there?
You know, I was in Chile and Argentina in the 70s. I was when the Allende lost power and the military took over. And I was in the dirty war in Argentina. And then I went home. But suddenly I went to Nicaragua in 78. And a remarkable thing happened there. I saw that the revolution was coming. It was a dictator, Somoza, that needed to be overthrown by the people. And it was such a massive mobilization of the people in Nicaragua, churches, students, everybody. And they joined in June 1979. And in 6 weeks, they overthrew the Somoza dictatorship. And I was a journalist, and I was following these things. But very, very soon after the revolution, the counter-revolution started, and that interested me. And I went also with the counter-revolution, and I went from Honduras, the border country, into Nicaragua. And when I was walking with these people, we had all the days we walked at night, and the days we were just trying to stay away from the sun in the heat. And we talked a lot. And there a fellow said he had killed a person in the village of San Fernando. He bragged about it. And I took his testimony, and then I went to the other side, to the San Fernando village, to see the effect of his killing in that village. And that's how I started my project in San Fernando. I like the people, and since then I've stayed there quite a lot of time.
And what was so special about Nonosca that you showed her and you decided to put your camera on her? What was so attracted to her? In the film we can see we have this very special moment when you present her first footage with her when she's brushing her teeth, comparing it to the rest of the material that you get. It's really incredible, but I was just super curious what was so attracted to her that she became the character of your epic documentary?
No, she was a young girl, and I never knew that I would follow her. I had this image in the beginning. I knew the family, and since then I've gone on with trying to make films about this neighborhood. I never made the choice that Nonosca was the most important woman in the village. She just happened to be in my film, and I knew her more and more, and a friendship arose. And since then I've been keeping on, and it's a woman, and more and more I've seen the machismo in Latin America, which is horrible to such an extent. And I wanted to make a female portrait, finally. And then I had all these scenes with Nonosca, because what is interesting to me is life, the existence. How is it to live? And going through the life with Nonosca and her husband in the beginning, Tinoco, and to see how the lack of love is hidden behind the surface. And this migration to Europe, I never planned it, but it came. And so I understand that when you film small people, ordinary people, and you do that for a time, you will also film aspects of world history. And that is interesting. If you're faithful to what you are portraying, you will portray something that is greater than just a small piece that you see in the lens.
And can you tell us when was the moment that actually you wanted to have more and more contact with Nonosca, that you wanted to have more and more story of her life and more footage with her? Was it like a very particular moment that you decided to shoot this huge monumental story about her life? Or maybe was it just because of the reason that you wanted to stay in touch with her and you were just planning to do something later?
No, I stayed with them. I stayed in San Fernando quite a time. And I made a film in the 90s about love. I didn't know if, because I'm following time, I try to be in step with it, but I don't have a manuscript. I just follow what I see and what the camera is able to capture. And this love story, it's called The Lovers in San Fernando. I didn't know if that would be a feel-good film about real love and a happy film. And I made it, and it was not such a happy film. And then I continued. I made another film about my own experience in Nicaragua, where I'm not allowed anymore to enter because I was involved in a terrorist attack in a very unlucky way. And for that film, I lived with Tinoco and Nonosca, stayed in her house, and I got so strong scenes from that I could not use in this film about my own experience in Nicaragua, which is called Last Chapter. And it's maybe the best images that I've ever seen about the end of a love, about a divorce, and I could not use them. So and in that segment, she also decides to go as far away from home as she can because she's afraid of her husband, and she would never get the strength to divorce if she could not go abroad as far away as possible. And she decided to borrow money and to go to Europe. And in the beginning, I help her. I don't film, just to make it into Europe without being stopped. And then some years later, I go back to Nonosca. I ask her, can I film your adventures in Europe? And she says yes. And there we go. And in the end, which is very open, she cannot live in Nicaragua because it's very dangerous. She has young children and they are being attacked by the government. And I don't know where she will go from the end, in the end of the film, for the rest of her life. Then she is in Spain and she is undecided.
So actually,
myself.
so actually,
Yes?
why did you decide Why did you decide to finish your documentary right now? Why did you decide to stop your project and tell the story of Nonosca to the people? Didn't you want to wait a little bit longer and see how her story gonna continue?
No, I think the story is that it's a very uncertain time and it's difficult to adapt oneself to these times. And you have to finish a film a Tuesday because you have no more money and it's the end of the project. And that's what happened to me. And then you edit it, and if you're lucky, you will have something that is rich for the viewer to see. And when you work without a manuscript, there is a house that she builds in the film, and that could have been the end of the film, but it was not true in an existential way. It could have been a film ending, but it was not the real ending of her life, because she's still in the loop of trying to make it in life, to make money in order to have a decent upbringing for her children and for herself. And how to do that, I don't know. I'm coming from Sweden, so I'm much more privileged in that way. I have a security system that, but she has not.
And talking about that aspect, when you came there in the moment where, with the political change in Nicaragua, you came there in the moment that white people, that American people were not treated in a good way. There was a lot of conflicts in between people from Nicaragua and with Americans, an example. So how these people, how did they react for you, for the white guy from Sweden, from the privileged country that come to their place and their stories?
I've been very lucky. I've been traveling most of my life. And my job is to be a stranger and a gringo, and to be as good as a stranger as possible. And I was lucky. I was there and I shared the lives with the people, slept on the ground and so on. And I think that's how you prove yourself the way you are. And then it is much easier. This film about the Nicaraguan experience, the last chapter, was the most viewed film ever in Nicaragua. It went to the theaters and so on. And I was not marked as a stranger, as an outsider. I've been lucky in that way. And yeah, the problem in the beginning of my film was that it was a divided country. It was at war with the United States and the neighboring countries, and San Fernando was a very, very divided village, and where one part wants to kill the other part, and that's a very delicate balancing you have to do when you're filming. But I was sympathizing with the revolution, and I was on the Nicaraguan side in the war with the Sandinistas. But the war took everything of the ideas out of the project. And when peace came in 1990, there was not a real democracy formed in Nicaragua. And the Sandinistas gradually became the new dictators of Nicaragua, a very sad, evil circle that happened. And today, Ortega, who is the president of Nicaragua, is a dictator who controls everything of the legal affairs, of the economy in Nicaragua. And I don't know before I die if I will see change come and if I will be allowed to enter Nicaragua again. But I hope so. I hope I will be there for the elections in 21, 22.
Before I allow our viewers to ask the questions, I would like to ask you two more things. The first thing is that the revolution, the counter-revolution, and all of these political changes in Nicaragua, it brought as well a lot of social changes. The one that Nonosca is telling about in your film is the change in terms of how society treats women these days. Do you see that actually women in the past, during the time of Sandista, they were more equal in the society than they are nowadays in Nicaragua?
No, that was these things are difficult to express. There was a direction that men and women were equal and should have equal power. That was a very strong direction in the beginning of the revolution. And but people, they are formed in the old society, you know, and the control of the husbands over their wives was still very strong. And when war ended, ideals and the direction towards the future of ideals was not as strong as before. It's much, much better today than it was in the Somoza time, but in the countryside and in the poor parts of the society, the oppression of women is still very, very strong. So I think what you see in the film about the beating of Ninoshka, not the worst. She was not killed or so on, like many others. But I think it's very typical. I think it's very difficult to be an independent woman in the third world. Much more difficult than I ever could imagine.
And the last question I wanted to ask you is the question about the fact that you decided from the very beginning to show yourself in the documentary. You do not pretend to be the invisible director, the invisible person in their life. You are the part of the life. You present us your impact on them. Why did you decide to shoot it like that?
It happened like that. But in the beginning, I was like everybody. I cut myself out of every shot in a lot of the material that I shot. But with the years, I understood that there is a value in to make the narration that is more four-dimensional, where you are seeing the world, and that is not uninteresting. It's interesting to see how a temperament and forms experience, but that depends very much on how you make the narration. I try not to inform so much. I want to speak about existence and experience, and if I'm very, very lucky, in the next film, you come to certain truth that way. You don't cheat. And a lot of documentary making is cheating, which might be good for the film form, but not so much for the end result. That's my view.
Thank you so much, Peter. Here we have some questions from the audience. The first question is the question from Basia. Basia asks, how did you manage to get trust of characters you portrayed? It must have been a hard thing to do, as you were shooting them in a moment of the life that none would probably want to last as a film footage.
When I came to San Fernando, I came with a camera. I had the camera on always. The camera was with me. I had the cameraman, and I wanted them to be as interested as I was in the life and so on, which is difficult because. But I was there, and everything that happened, I was there with a camera. So I was a man with a camera, and they never stopped me. And I was not that intrusive, I think. They were used to me in that way. And I think, in a way, maybe not so much in the world of the reality shows, that people want to be seen. And if you, in your way of being, can make people seen, I think you can come a long way, because it's also a liberation for themselves. I think Nonosca has a hard time now looking at her own film, but I think she learns a lot. But when you have that scene in the divorce, when she really say, this is the end, she didn't plan that. It happened that way. And her face is a surface for many interpretations, and also for her. And I've been lucky because I've been interested in that, to film things that were very intimate. And I'm coming from Sweden, where they told me a way that the world was. And I went out into the world like Don Quixote, and I saw that the world was not as what my parents and people in Sweden in that time had told me. It was different. And I wanted to film that reality that was different. And if you try that, you will also come to film what is your own life, because I also have bad loves and divorces and so on. So it's not a new sensation for me. I think it's life. And I think most of the basic things in life are similar for the people in this world, and that we are more similar than we are different. I think that is my basic starting point, that we are very equal. When you film another person, it's like filming yourself.
And that's really beautiful message. Thank you so much. And the next question is the question from Carolina. The question is about if you are still in touch with Nonosca, and if there is a chance for another documentary that will be some kind of postscriptum or a sequel for this one.
I don't know. for the moment, I'm in contact with Nonosca, and for the moment, this is the end point. I am a very old person. I will be 80 years old when I make my last film. And the interesting thing with this project has been I've been going through the archives that I had, and with the aid of my editor, Göran Gester, who's a brilliant person, we tried to get the chronology together from all the scenes without changing anything. And then we got a very lengthy, unusual story. And I think that it's the best thing that I have ever done. And Nonosca is there, but it's a collective in the world that is formed with the love and with the hate and with the sweet things and with the horrible things. And I would like to continue that, but I don't know how to do it, because that film, I'm going to film the last part of that film in Mexico. It will be 7 hours long, and I'm thinking about museums or universities or something, but it's not for the market. But I think it would be the best film I've been participating in, but I still don't know how to do it. And there, I also will make the end part, the saying goodbye to Nonosca. But I don't know if this will happen, because when you get older, you lose strength. And to be a documentary filmmaker with the budgets that I have, which are very small, it's a hassle always to get it together. But I will try, because I started in Mexico. I will end there. I started in the Olympics of '68, and that was a big massacre in a place called Tlatelolco. And they still don't know, and I filmed there, how many people were killed there, if it was 7 or if it was 700. And I don't understand how that is possible in a modern society, that you can't find that out. So I will go and find the counterpoint in the end of the other horror of Mexico and the beauty of the Mexican society, because it's a terrific society, it's exciting. And to see what I find with a new kind of violence and the old kind of love. If I find something simple and graphic that I could end this this long documentary with, then I would connect Africa, Chile, Bosnia, Sweden, and Latin America in one film, and show the world that I've been experiencing from the Second World War on. Maybe something even from Poland would come there.
We wish you a lot of strength, and we wish you a lot of money.
Do you think I'm crazy?
We wish you a lot of strength. We wish you a lot of money for making that kind of documentaries, and apparently we hope to see it at the next edition of Krakow Film Festival. Thank you so much, Peter. We have some questions to Hassan as well. Can we return to Hassan, please? Hassan, we have a question for you from Olga. Olga asks if you know what's going on with your characters right now, how they are dealing.
Yeah, so I'm in pretty constant contact with Daryl. We formed a great friendship. He's doing really well. Well, he's doing much better than he was when we left him at the end of the film. On this kind of uplifting note, he's continued this kind of positive trajectory. Of course, the aspects of the film that you see are cyclical: addiction, alcohol abuse, and it is a struggle for him always, but he's doing well. Darnez is progressing well. The characters, or the group, as we call them in the film, in Camden, they're doing this about the same. They are much harder to get in contact with. We do now and again. But I know Daryl and Nani are no longer speaking, no longer seeing each other as we left them at the end of the film. Iman, Ty, Sarah, all them, Nikki, they're still living, unfortunately, the same life on the streets of Camden.
And Bartek asks, what is the situation of drug-addicted people during the time of coronavirus in the US?
Yeah, that's actually, I'm really interested in that, and we are trying to find out. Unfortunately, I'm stuck in Iraq because of coronavirus, which is where I am now. So we have been trying to figure out, of course, cities. So in the US, of course, it's the epicenter of the world, the most deaths, most cases, and cities such as Camden have been hit extra hard. It's because of a bunch of things, but it is a place, and these are places where the coronavirus has really wreaked havoc. So I can only imagine, and from the stories I've heard on the ground, if you can multiply that exponentially for a city such as Camden with people who are abusing drugs, I can only imagine it's absolutely terrible what's going on the ground there. I will say, though, that Camden, if you check our Instagram page, Higher Love Film, we just put up a video, and the police, they were one of the first cities, I believe the first city, where the police put down their riot gear and masks and everything, and they actually marched with the protesters, which was an amazing thing to see. So it definitely is a hard time in cities like Camden and US as a whole, but it was great to see that the police kind of crossed the line and marched with the citizens of Camden.
Gotcha. And the last question we have is the question from Błażej. Błażej asks if you know why, what is your opinion, what is your ideas, why Daryl is fighting for his relationship so hard? Do you consider him co-addicted as well?
Yeah, definitely. That was a theme that we worked with. And it plays into the title of the film, Higher Love. They all have to make a choice of what their end is going to be. And Daryl is definitely addicted to Nani and this love. And I think, as Peter mentioned, I think these themes really reverberate with the viewer, because yes, or no, the viewer cannot maybe see themselves in this situation. And at first glance, it's almost maddening to see Daryl keep going back to this love of Nani. But it is a theme that you can really relate to, because it's just this pure love that he has for her, that he can't put down until the end. And he can't put the betterment of his son as the #1 priority for him until the end. So it is an addiction, but I think love in general is some sort of chemical. I'm sure they share a lot of the same chemical properties, same chemical reactions. So I do agree with that question, that it is an addiction, but I think love in general tends to go that way.
I have to tell you that I am absolutely a fan of the title of your film. I like the pun that you involved in it. It's really good. Okay, so as I said, Hassan, hopefully we see each other next year in Krakow with your new documentary about Yazidi. And as for today, I think we're done. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being here with us. Peter, Hassan, thank you so much for joining us and talking about your great documentaries, about your great works. Here with us, we had Peter Torbjörnsson, the director of the film Nonosca. Thank you so much, Peter.
Thank you. And thank you,
And
Hassan. It was interesting to listen to you.
And Hassan Osman, the director of the film Higher Love. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
Ciao.
Thank you both so much.
Great. And apparently we invite you to the rest of our wonderful screening. Until Sunday, you can see a lot of interesting films, and apparently there is a lot of interesting discussion after the screenings in our Q&A sessions. Thank you so much.
Thank you.